There are indeed sticking points that you are aware of,
yes,
which we view as falling within the domestic issues,
right.
The sovereignty of South Africa.
Yes, so they're not up for negotiation.
Yes, they know. The issues of BEE, the issues of land reform, redistribution, and the false narrative of genocide,
yes,
which the world knows that is not the correct narrative.
What happens when a country tries to fix centuries of racial inequality and a superpower comes and tells it to stop? My people, South Africa's government is under massive pressure from the United States, and specifically President Trump, to roll back its Black economic empowerment laws. Now, these are policies designed to give Black South Africans a fair shot at ownership, jobs, and opportunity after decades of apartheid. But now, the U.S. government says South Africa's BEE laws discriminate against white South Africans and foreign companies, and they're imposing 30% tariffs on South African exports like cars, wine, and citrus, unless those laws are changed. The United States is South Africa's second largest trading partner, accounting for billions in exports every year. So what do you do when one of your biggest economic partners tells you to abandon the very policies meant to correct your history? Let's break it down. So let's give this some context. For months now, the government of South Africa has been locked in negotiations with the U.S. for a new trade deal. Why? Because on April 1st, President Trump slapped South Africa with a 30% tariff on its exports, everything from cars to citrus, when he introduced what he called Liberation Day. Since then, Pretoria has been going to great lengths to negotiate a way out. They've tried everything, even appointing a special envoy to lobby Washington directly. But the talks aren't going anywhere. Why? Because Washington isn't just talking trade. They're demanding policy change. Specifically, they want South Africa to scrap its Black economic empowerment laws, the same laws designed to give Black South Africans a fair shot at ownership, jobs, and opportunity after decades of apartheid. Because according to Trump, it's white South Africans who are being persecuted, not Black people. That's why his administration has opened its doors to white South African refugees while closing them to practically everyone else. On October 21st, South Africa's Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola spoke at the Financial Times Africa Summit in London, and he didn't hold back. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, I want to invite you to join our family here at PanaGenius TV and be a part of conversations that are shaping the future. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for alerts. And if you want to support our work and help us reach more people, you can drop a super thanks on this video or join our growing membership community. Thank you so much for your support. Let's get back to the show.
The negotiations are continuing, and as you are aware, with the current administration, they remain unpredictable. We don't know what will be the end product, but we can confirm that indeed the negotiations are proceeding, and at this stage at a very positive level of engagement, exchange of notes. You will have seen the extension, a reprieve on PEPFAR, which happened last week. There is also positive vibes coming out of Congress with regards to AGOA, which we also view as a very important platform. And obviously, with regards to the tariffs, we are awaiting the feedbacks, but the negotiations are going very well. There are indeed sticking points that you are aware of,
yes,
which we view as falling within the domestic issues,
right.
The sovereignty of South Africa.
Yes, so they're not up for negotiation.
Yes, they know. The issues of BEE, the issues of land reform, redistribution, and the false narrative of genocide,
yes,
which the world knows that is not the correct narratives. Those obviously get thrown in from time to time, but we have insisted that these should be separated from the trade engagements, so that we can come out with some solution, but it does look like the USTR see it indeed as an issue of separate discussion.
Yes.
But overall, at a strategic higher level, these issues are seen as part of the whole trade negotiation.
He said, and I quote, "We've insisted that our domestic policies must be separated from the trade engagements." Basically, Lamola revealed that the U.S. had tried to raise not just BEE laws, but land redistribution and even the false narrative of a white farmers' genocide during trade talks. He added that there were positive vibes from Congress about renewing the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. But the real problem remains that Washington wants to link trade access to domestic policy change. So that's the background. And now back to the question. What happens when one of your biggest trade partners tells you to abandon your foundational economic justice policies or lose that access? So let's take a step back, because to understand why this moment matters, you've got to understand why these laws exist in the first place and the problem that they set out to address. For nearly half a century, South Africa was built on apartheid, a system that wasn't just about racial segregation. It was economic design. It deliberately excluded Black South Africans from owning land, starting businesses, or accessing capital. When apartheid ended in 1994, Nelson Mandela inherited a country where less than 10% of the land and wealth were in Black hands. And yet, this was a nation where Black people made up almost 90% of the population. So how do you fix that? You don't just say we're equal now, right? You have to rebuild a system from the ground up in business, ownership, and opportunity. So that's how Black Economic Empowerment, or BBEE, was born. It's a policy that rewards companies for including Black South Africans in every layer of the economy: ownership, management, supply chains, and community development. In short, it was South Africa's attempt to turn political freedom into economic freedom. Because what's the point of ending apartheid if the same people still own everything? Now, over the years, the program evolved into broad-based Black Economic Empowerment, or BBBEE, to ensure that it didn't just benefit a few elites, but reached ordinary South Africans through education, entrepreneurship, and job creation. Now, has it been perfect? Absolutely not. Critics say that it's been captured by political elites or misused by corporations gaming the system. But even with its flaws, the principle behind it remains powerful, that economic justice is essential for real democracy. And that's what makes Washington's pressure so explosive. Because this isn't just about tariffs. It's about a foreign power telling a post-colonial nation how to structure its own justice.
Is the American side, are they digging in? Are they insisting that you reopen those issues, or have they accepted that these are sovereign issues for South Africa and you should just talk about trade?
Yes, they are insisting that we should reopen, but sometimes, as I've said, some of it is based on a clear misunderstanding of our domestic avenues.
Yes.
Sometimes it is a clear understanding, it's just an ideological issue.
Yep.
Because of the various quotas involved in the process. As you are aware, there is a number of South Africans sending the negative message. And one of the issues we have continued to clarify is that in terms of the land reform program in South Africa, compensation is part of it.
Yes.
And the issue of nil compensation, which is contested in the expropriation bill, the bill is clear that there are specific land parcels that can be expropriated without compensation. And they are clearly tabulated. But the principle is very clear. It's with compensation. And the Constitution does allow that in certain circumstances, it can be done without compensation.
Yes.
So these are issues that we continue to engage on, but they are sticking on their point.
Okay.
And we are hopeful that we will be able to find each other.
Now, here's where things get even more interesting. Because this fight isn't really about trade paperwork or technical tariffs. It's about power. It's about politics and perception. Let's be honest. President Trump isn't suddenly concerned about fairness or inclusion in South Africa, is he? This is about ideology and optics. Upon returning to office this year, he's pushed this narrative that white South Africans are being persecuted. He's called their situation a genocide. And in classic Trump fashion, he's using that claim to justify both his refugee policy and his pressure campaign on Pretoria. So while he's shutting the door on refugees from Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East, he's welcoming white South Africans with open arms, branding them as victims of discrimination. And that framing, that reversal of history is dangerous because it flips the script on apartheid. It paints those who once benefited from oppression as the oppressed, and those fighting for equity as the aggressors. Meanwhile, behind all that rhetoric, this is also about economic leverage. American companies have long complained that South Africa's BEE laws make it harder for them to do business, especially when they're required to give up ownership stakes or meet inclusion targets. So Trump's administration is using trade as a weapon, tying economic access to domestic compliance. Think about that. A country that's trying to undo the effects of racism being punished by a nation that once, that's important, right, lectured the world about equality. And here's the irony. Washington calls BEE discriminatory, but every year, the U.S. government spends hundreds of billions on programs that are designed to favor small businesses, veterans, women, and minorities, although many of them are changing right now, to be fair. But you gotta ask, what's the difference? This isn't about principle, right? It's about control. It's about keeping Africa's largest economy dependent, compliant, and open for business on Western terms. Because if South Africa can successfully define its own version of justice, others will follow. And perhaps that's the part that really scares Trump. So let's zoom out, my people, because this moment, this clash between South Africa and the United States isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a much bigger story about Africa's fight for economic sovereignty in a world still shaped by old power structures. Let's be real, South Africa isn't just any country, right? It's Africa's most industrialized economy. It's a member of BRICS, sitting at the same table as China, Russia, India, and Brazil. It's got mineral wealth, manufacturing strength, and regional influence. And for years, it's been quietly pushing a message that Africa should chart its own course, trade more with itself, and depend less on Western aid and markets. So when Trump imposes tariffs and demands that South Africa abandon its Black empowerment laws, it's not just a policy disagreement, it's a power play. It's a warning shot to any African nation thinking of building an economy that prioritizes its own people first. Because that's really what's at stake here. Who gets to define what justice looks like in a global economy? When the West gives subsidies to its farmers, it's called support. But when Africa tries to empower its citizens, it's called discrimination. When Europe protects its industries, it's called, strategic, right? It's very strategic. But when South Africa attempts to protect its people, it's called unfair. See the double standard? This isn't just about South Africa's BEE laws. It's about the right of African nations to build economies rooted in redress, inclusion, and ownership without external punishment. And South Africa's resistance matters not just for itself, but for every country on the continent that's just tired of being told what its freedom should look like. Because if Pretoria backs down today, it sends a message that even decades after colonialism and apartheid, Africa still doesn't control its own destiny. But if it stands firm, even under sanctions, even under pressure, it could spark something far bigger. A new conversation about economic liberation, about what true sovereignty really means in the 21st century. So, what happens next? Well, right now, South Africa is standing at a crossroads. On one hand, it's facing billions of dollars in losses if the U.S. keeps those 30% tariffs in place. Tens of thousands of jobs in auto, agriculture, and manufacturing are at risk. The country's currency has already taken a hit, and its coalition government is under pressure to stabilize the economy. On the other hand, giving in to the U.S. demands would mean betraying the very foundation of post-apartheid South Africa. You know, the idea that freedom without economic justice isn't freedom at all. So that's the dilemma. And it's not just Pretoria's problem. This is a continental moment. Because if the most advanced economy in Africa, with its institutions and resources and global partnerships, can be forced to abandon its empowerment policies under pressure, what chance do smaller African nations have? This is why the outcome of this standoff, yes, matters. If South Africa holds the line, it sends a message, right? That Africa's justice isn't negotiable. That economic redress is not discrimination. It's restoration. And make no mistake, other global players are watching too. China, Russia, even India, all members of BRICS, are quietly positioning themselves to fill the gap if the U.S. walks away. And that could reshape not just trade, but the global balance of influence in Africa. So yes, the stakes are high. This isn't just about tariffs or policy. It's about the right of a people, of a continent, to define their own path to equality without asking for permission. Because history has shown us that every time Africa starts demanding ownership instead of access, or equity instead of aid, the world gets uncomfortable. But maybe that's exactly the point, right? Maybe true transformation was never meant to make the powerful comfortable. And again, this kind of pressure that we're seeing from the Trump administration is not unique to South Africa. Because just this month, I reported that Burkina Faso called out the United States for what it flat out described as blackmail. Trump's administration approached Burkina Faso with a demand: accept deportees from America, including non-Burkinabe citizens or nationals, as part of his mass deportation policy. But you know, Traoré doesn't play. So Burkina Faso said no. They refused to become a dumping ground for people that the U.S. didn't want. And almost immediately after that refusal, Washington suspended visa services for Burkinabe citizens. No visas, no travel, no explanation beyond a policy review. Burkina's foreign minister, Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré, didn't mince words. He said, quote, "Is this pressure? Is this blackmail? Burkina Faso is a place of dignity, not a place of expulsion." Sound familiar? Because whether it's South Africa being punished for protecting Black economic rights or Burkina Faso being punished for refusing a deportation deal, the message is the same. If you don't play by Washington's rules, you're going to pay the price. This is no longer about trade or migration. It's about control. Tariffs, visas, sanctions, all being used as tools to bend African nations into submission. But here's what's changing. Africa's not taking it quietly anymore. From Pretoria to Ouagadougou, leaders are starting to call this what it is: a new form of coercion. And instead of bowing, they're beginning to push back, forming alliances, finding new partners, and reimagining what sovereignty actually looks like. Because if every time Africa says no, it's punished, then maybe saying no is exactly what freedom requires. So, my people, where do we go from here? What's happening in South Africa, what's happening in Burkina Faso and other parts of the continent, it's not coincidence. It's a pattern that we're seeing. Trade, visas, sanctions, all being used as tools of power to remind African nations who still holds the keys to the global system. But here's the truth. The continent wants change. This generation of African leaders, thinkers, and citizens is no longer content with symbolic independence. At least some of them. At least. They want sovereignty that's real, sovereignty over their policies, their people, and their progress. Because freedom that can be revoked by a tariff, is that truly freedom? And justice that needs foreign approval, is that truly justice? South Africa's stand on BEE, Burkina Faso's defiance on deportations, these are small chapters in a much bigger story. The story of a continent that's finally refusing to be bullied for choosing itself. And whether you agree with every policy or not, one thing is clear. Africa is learning to say no. No to coercion, no to manipulation, and no to the idea that liberation must always come with permission. And we need more no's coming from African leaders. So the next time you hear talk about partnerships and democracy, you got to ask yourself, is it partnership if one side sets all the terms? Is it democracy if sovereignty ends where dependency begins? Because true liberation, economic or political, starts when the people decide that their dignity is not for negotiation. It's not for sale. So anyway, I turn it over to you now, my people. What do you think? Is South Africa right to stand firm, even if it risks losing billions? And how far should they be willing to go with these negotiations? And at what cost? Let's talk in the comments and let's provide some clear solutions for South Africa. And as always, if you enjoyed this breakdown, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. I'm Sandra Babu-Boateng. And until next time, take care.